Good morning, everybody. I'm just going to say a few words in the absence of David Truesdale, the chairman of the council, who's celebrating his big birthday this weekend. You can guess how old that was, I won't tell you. But this is a great honour for Thame and Haddenham to have this memorial to the history of this site installed here. We've been trying to plan this for a couple of years now, but the changes that have been going on in Haddenham recently, I think it's all really important that we remember the history of what's gone on and the Haddenham's past. So we're really pleased to be welcoming Thame Haddenham here today. It's his project. He's going around the whole country installing these kind of memorials so that we can remember the history of airfields across the country. I'll hand over to Kenneth to tell you a little bit more about his project and what we're here for today.
Thank you very much.
Come in the middle, Ken.
Yeah, I'll come in the middle. Yeah, that's maybe easier. Thanks. Well, thank you very much, first of all, for Sue and everyone that, and Ian and Emma, who isn't here today, and everyone at Haddenham Parish Council for your help. You know, very greatly appreciated. Well, my name is Kenneth Bannerman. I'm the head of the Airfields of Britain Conservation Trust, or ABCT, as we also call it for short. If you haven't heard of us before, we are essentially the world's first national airfield charity. We formed in 2006 and we're based in Glasgow, where I live. And one of the many things we do with our charity is that we erect commemorative granite memorials to Britain's disused airfields and all the very brave and dedicated people who have served at them. And of course, not forgetting their families as well. Now, I won't go in the whole history of Thame because we'd be here forever and a day mentioning this, and it's not alone in that respect. But why I just mentioned that as a sort of an initial lead-in is that the initial days of the airfield were very complicated. It tried to open twice before World War II started, and it came incredibly close to opening just at the start of World War II. There was literally the one aircraft that landed here just a few days before Germany invaded Poland, and further aircraft were due to land here coming in from an airfield near London. But then of course World War II broke out, so the opening plans, which were earmarked for either September or October 1939, had to be at the very least put on ice. However, the airfield was not forgotten about, and the military requisitioned the land in mid-June 1940, and the initial plan was to have Haddenham, as we'll call it here, although as you will see in the memorial, we necessarily have to call it Thame brackets Haddenham, because the Royal Air Force tended to call it Thame officially. But for our purposes here, we'll naturally call it Haddenham. So it was originally earmarked as a relief landing ground for Booker, better known these days as Wickham Air Park. But apart from the fact that Booker had only just opened itself before World War II, and it is still to reopen in a military capacity for another year, flying here, from all the research we've done, did not actually start until the first day of 1941. Although without wishing to accidentally confuse matters here, there are unsubstantiated reports that well-known Oxfordshire airfield Benson may have used it as a relief landing ground in the second half of 1940, but there are no hard facts about that, just rumoured. However, this is all part, unfortunately, of the complicated history, because it involves one of Britain's best known airfields and one of our most obscure. The famous one was Ringway, which is far better known today as Manchester Airport, and the obscure one was a site near Newmarket in East Anglia called Sighthill. So essentially there was a unit called the Glider Training Squadron, and this was formed at Ringway round about the close of the Battle of Britain. Now, where's Sighthill? This is an important part of the story, and this is how Haddenham came into play. The GTS, if we can call it that, were trying to find a replacement airfield for Ringway, and they were looking at Sighthill near Newmarket. The dates are all over the place historically, but with the research we've done, it seems, apart from anything, the GTS never actually even used Sighthill. They were there for a number of days, and then they decided to decamp back to Ringway. But then Haddenham was one of about 5 or 6 airfields or airfield sites that the GTS was looking at, and it was thought to be the most suitable. So therefore, that squadron came here on New Year's Day, 1941. So perfectly reasonably, we can regard that as the opening date of Haddenham. Gliders came in here, a mixture of tiger moths and requisitioned civil sailplanes, Kirby kites. Things were so disorganised at the time, they had to hardly clear derelict cars off the landing area. There were hardly any facilities. A World War I hangar, Bessino, canvas hangar, was quickly erected as well. Various requisition buildings, farm buildings, private houses came into play. Matters were quickly better organised, so instead of, for example, the Kirby kites, General Aircraft Limited Hotspur gliders were brought in, Britain's main training glider of World War II, and then also Hawker Hector biplanes as glider tugs. So certainly, say about the summer of 1941, things were getting more organised. The only problem the authorities thought at the time, although this was a bit mistaken with what happened after World War II, was that Haddenham was thought to be a bit small for military gliders. So come the summer of 1942, the replacement gliding unit here went to Crowton in Northamptonshire. And gliding training more or less finished at the start of 1943, but this was not the end of Haddenham by any means. And this is somewhat forgotten because it then became very heavily involved in ferry pilot training. Not terribly well recorded, but there was major flying of that nature involving all types of aircraft until the end of World War II. It was also associated with a rather enigmatic airfield in Bedfordshire called Barton in the Clay, which again, in some respects like Haddenham, is very difficult to historically research. The RAF eventually pulled out of Thame, as they called it, in the spring of 1946. But flying carried on in a civil capacity. So as some of you may well remember, there was a firm here for many years called Airtech Limited. And that carried on, that was the operator of the airfield until the start of the 1990s. So you had aircraft maintenance here, and this was why it seemed a bit strange, the decision to get rid of gliders here, because you had aircraft like Hanley Page Halifaxes and Short Stirlings using transport bomber capacity here in some numbers in the late 1940s, for example. Now, as regards the Upward Bound Trust and all the marvellous work that that organisation did with helping young people become glider pilots and so on, this was a big part of the story as well, of course. They came to Haddenham in 1965, and as you will see again on our memorial, we acknowledge the last day of major flying here. That was at the end of 2018. So Obviously, Haddenham is now disused in a flying capacity, but just to finally say before we unveil the memorial, as we say in our travels, please do all you possibly can to help save and honour Britain's airfields, active and disused, because we just cannot remotely afford to lose them in our everyday lives. Might not be obvious, but as we simply say, you can literally walk down the street anywhere in the UK and there are airfield links all around us, just in our everyday lives, work, recreation, power, emergency services, even right down to our health. That is how important our airfields are, although we might not realise it. And we just have to generally, with our airfields, not forgetting all the incredibly brave and dedicated people who've served at them, and in turn not forgetting their families. We've just got to far better treat them. And I recognised this instantly 50 years ago this month, when, dare I say, I was just 9 years old, nearly 60, and lucky to be here, by the way. But even at that very young age, just through a chance encounter with an airfield in East Anglia, which I was again at, funny enough, only just last week, it just suddenly hit me just how incredibly important these places were, are, and always will be. Plus, not forgetting all the people associated with them. And it was a classic case of something just had to be done to try and help them. And all I can say is for ABCT, my word, we are really, really making a difference in all sorts of ways. Obviously not for any gain, actually, but we are definitely making a real difference through memorials, helping to save airfields, saving people from losing their jobs. And bear in mind, in that case, we're talking about airfields that closed as far back as the 1930s. So it's we're definitely making a real difference. So again, thank you so much for coming. And we're very pleased you seem to be happy with this memorial, and therefore we're really honoured to be able to unveil our latest memorial to yet another of Britain's absolutely priceless assets, in this case, as we have to call it, Thame Haddenham Airfield. So thank you all very much. Thank you. Okay, just unveil? Yeah. Yep. Okay. Yeah, just take a corner, that's fine. Yeah. No, there you go. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenny.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you.
This is the Deputy Mayor of Thame, Andy Gilbert. I don't know if you would like to say a few words.
Yeah, just very quickly. It's a windy morning, and it's just great to see so many people turned out to remember something that happened, by my maths, 82 years ago that started. And any society that forgets its past is going to struggle to track its future. So it's so important, and it's great to see so many people out. So thanks for inviting me all the way over the border from Thame. And we look forward to lots of other connections, maybe even a cycle path between. We're not going to go into that now. That's for another day. So thank you very much. Thank you, Sue, for inviting me.
Thank you.
Okay.
If anybody would like a cup of tea, cup of coffee, we're going to serve something for you inside.